I watched through the glass partition as my sister Sarah collapsed to her knees in the doctoral committee's conference room, her face contorted in a way I'd never seen before. Pure animal terror. The dean was holding up two documents side by side, her voice cutting through the soundproofed glass like a knife through silk. "This is career-ending plagiarism, Ms. Chen. You've stolen another researcher's work word for word." What Sarah didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that the other researcher was me. The same sister she'd poisoned 3 years ago to steal this very research. The same sister who died choking on her own blood in a campus bathroom while Sarah was accepting accolades for her groundbreaking work on quantum entanglement applications in neural networks. But I wasn't dead anymore. I was very much alive, standing outside that conference room with my own PhD acceptance letter in hand, watching the beginning of her end. The thing about dying is that it gives you perspective, and the thing about being reborn into your own body 6 years in the past is that it gives you power, absolute terrifying power. I was 23 when my sister killed me. I'm 17 now, a freshman at Stanford, and I just published the very research she was about to present as her doctoral thesis. Published it 6 months ago under my own name, with timestamps, peer reviews, and a level of detail that could only come from the original researcher. Because I am the original researcher, I always was. Let me take you back to understand how we got here. Back to a childhood that should have been filled with love, but was instead a masterclass in systematic destruction. My parents had Sarah when they were young and in love. She was their miracle baby, born after 3 miscarriages. They named her Sarah, which means princess, and they treated her exactly like one. Every accomplishment was celebrated, every failure was someone else's fault, every whim was indulged. Then I came along 4 years later, an accident, an inconvenience, a drain on resources that should have gone to their precious firstborn. Mom never hid her favoritism. "Sarah needs new ballet shoes," she'd say, taking money from the envelope marked with my name. "You can wear your old sneakers another year, Emma. You're not doing anything important anyway." Dad was worse because he pretended to be fair. He'd ruffle my hair and call me sport, while slipping Sarah an extra $100 for the mall. He'd say things like, "Both my girls are special," while attending every single one of Sarah's recitals and missing every one of my science fairs. When I was 12 and Sarah was 16, I started to understand that I was smart. Not just classroom smart, but genuinely, frighteningly intelligent. I taught myself calculus from library books. I built a working computer from scrapped parts I found at the dump. I wrote algorithms that could predict traffic patterns with 87% accuracy. My teachers noticed. They called my parents in for meetings, used words like gifted and prodigy and full scholarship potential. My parents smiled and nodded and did absolutely nothing. "Emma doesn't need special programs," my mother told Mrs. Richardson, my 8th grade teacher who'd driven to our house on her own time. "She's fine in regular classes. We can't afford private tutors anyway. We're saving for Sarah's college." Mrs. Richardson looked at me with something like pity. Emma could get a full scholarship to any prep school in the country. She wouldn't need— "We're not interested in breaking up our family," my father interrupted. His hand was on my shoulder, squeezing just hard enough to hurt. "Emma stays here. End of discussion." I didn't understand it then. Now I do. They were afraid. Afraid that if I succeeded, if I shone too brightly, Sarah would look dim by comparison. So they did everything they could to keep me small. They succeeded for a while. Sarah went to Stanford on our parents' dime, every penny they had, plus loans they'd never be able to repay. She was an okay student. B's and C's, the occasional A when she actually applied herself. She was pretty and charming, and she knew how to make people like her. That got her further than her grades did. I went to community college. Not because I couldn't get into better schools. I'd been accepted to MIT, Caltech, and Stanford itself with full rides to all 3. But my parents hid the acceptance letters. I found them years later, stuffed in the back of my father's filing cabinet, already expired. "Community college is more practical," my mother said when I graduated high school. "You can live at home, save money, figure out what you want to do." What I wanted to do was quantum physics. What I did was work 2 jobs while taking classes and conducting research in a professor's lab for free, because I couldn't afford to be a paid student researcher. That's where I met Dr. Helen Park. She was visiting faculty from MIT, brilliant and uncompromising, with no patience for mediocrity and infinite patience for genuine talent. She saw something in me during her first lecture. I'd corrected an error in one of her proofs politely after class. "You," she said, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "What's your name?" "Emma Chen." "Why are you in community college, Emma Chen?" I didn't have a good answer. She didn't need one. By the end of the week, I was her research assistant. By the end of the month, she was telling me I was wasting my potential and needed to transfer to a real university immediately. "I can't afford it," I told her. "Scholarships exist for people like you. Come to MIT. I'll make sure you're funded." I should have said yes immediately. Instead, I made the mistake of going home and telling my family about the opportunity. Sarah was home for winter break. She was a junior at Stanford, struggling with her coursework, already worried about her future. She'd changed majors 3 times. Nothing stuck. Nothing excited her. When I mentioned Dr. Park's offer at dinner, the temperature in the room dropped 30 degrees. "MIT," my mother said, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "For quantum physics research," I said, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. "Dr. Park says I have a real shot at breakthrough work. She wants me to—" "Absolutely not," my father said. I blinked. "What?" "You're not going to MIT. You're staying here, finishing your associate's degree, and then we'll talk about what's next." "But this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Dr. Park is one of the leading researchers in May." "Emma." My mother's voice was steel. "Your father said no. This family can't afford to support 2 children in expensive universities. Sarah's education takes priority. She's older, she's almost done, and she's actually working toward a real degree. Your hobby can wait." "It's not a hobby," I whispered. "It's my life's work." Sarah hadn't said anything during this exchange. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Years later, in my first life, I would recognize it. Cold calculation. "Actually," Sarah said slowly, "maybe Emma should tell me more about this research." "What exactly are you working on?" I was so grateful for what seemed like support that I told her everything. I showed her my notebooks, my models, my projections. I explained my theory about using quantum entanglement as a framework for neural network architecture, a way to make AI not just smarter, but fundamentally different in how it processed information. She asked good questions, took notes, seemed genuinely interested. I was such a fool. 2 months later, Dr. Park called me into her office. Her face was grave. "Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course." "Did you share your research with anyone? Anyone at all?" My stomach dropped. "Only my sister. Why? What's wrong?" Dr. Park turned her laptop toward me. On the screen was a research proposal submitted to Stanford's doctoral program. The applicant was Sarah Chen. The research outlined was mine. Every word, every concept, every innovative leap. "This was submitted 3 weeks ago," Dr. Park said. "It's already been accepted. Your sister is starting her PhD at Stanford in the fall, fully funded, based on what appears to be your original work." I couldn't breathe. The room spun. "She wouldn't," I managed. "She's my sister. She wouldn't." "She did." Dr. Park's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm sorry, Emma. I've already contacted Stanford, but since she's your sister and you did share the information voluntarily, there's not much we can do without proof of malicious intent. She claims you were collaborating and that these were joint ideas developed together." "That's a lie." "I believe you, but belief isn't proof. Do you have dated documentation? Lab notes with timestamps? Anything that proves this work is solely yours?" I did. Months of notebooks, all carefully dated. But they were all at home in my room. I rushed back that afternoon. My room had been cleaned. My mother was apologetic but firm. I'd say, "I threw out all those old notebooks, honey. They were just taking up space, and Sarah said you'd finished with them. Sarah said? I repeated numbly, assoy. Well, yes. She mentioned you two were working together on something and that the project was complete. She said you'd want the space cleared for new work. Was she wrong? She wasn't wrong. She was calculating. She'd stolen my research and then convinced our mother to destroy the evidence. I went to Stanford anyway, confronted Sarah in person. She was living in a nice apartment near campus, paid for by her new doctoral stipend, a stipend that should have been mine. Emma! She hugged me like nothing was wrong. What are you doing here? You stole my research. Her smile didn't falter. I don't know what you mean. We worked on those ideas together, remember? You helped me develop them. I developed them. You took notes while I explained my work. That's not how I remember it. And honestly, Emma, even if your version were true, which it isn't, who's going to believe you? I'm the one at Stanford. I'm the one with the backing of the physics department. You're a community college student with no credentials and no proof. If you try to make trouble, I'll make sure you never work in academic research again. She said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. Why? I asked. Why would you do this to me? For the first time, real emotion crossed her face. Anger. Because I'm tired of being the disappointment, she hissed. Do you know what it's like being the favorite child who's actually mediocre? Everyone expects greatness from me because I'm Sarah Chen, the golden child, but I'm not great. I'm not even good. I'm just adequate. And then there's you, the accident, the afterthought, who's somehow brilliant without even trying. Do you know how that feels? To watch your younger sister be everything you're supposed to be? So you decided to steal my work and destroy my future? I decided to take what I deserved. Mom and Dad invested everything in me. This is just balancing the scales. I left. There was nothing else to say. I reported the plagiarism to every authority I could think of. But Sarah was right. I had no proof, and she had the backing of Stanford's doctoral program. They believed their incoming PhD student over some nobody from community college. Dr. Park tried to help, but her hands were tied. She wrote me a recommendation for MIT, but the plagiarism scandal, even though I was the victim, had made me toxic. No program wanted to touch me. I kept working, kept researching. If I couldn't do it through official channels, I'd do it independently. I got a job as a lab technician, used the equipment after hours, filled notebook after notebook with new developments on my original theory. Sarah, meanwhile, flourished. She sailed through her doctoral coursework using my foundational work. She made connections, networked, positioned herself as a rising star in the field. Our parents were so proud. 3 years into her program, she was ready to defend her dissertation. I knew because she called me out of nowhere. Emma, she said, her voice honey-sweet. I know things have been weird between us, but you're still my sister. I'm defending my dissertation next month, and I'd love for you to be there. Why? I asked flatly. Because family is important. And because, well, I want to thank you. You did help me with some of the early concepts, and I want to acknowledge that in my defense. I'm not a monster, Emma. I know I should have given you more credit from the start. It was a trap. I knew it was a trap. But I went anyway because some desperate part of me hoped she'd actually grown a conscience. The defense was scheduled for a Tuesday. I took the day off work and drove to Stanford. Sarah was radiant in a navy suit, her hair perfect, her smile confident. She hugged me when I arrived. I'm so glad you came. Here, I got you coffee, your favorite vanilla latte. I should have known. I should have fucking known. I made it 15 minutes into her presentation before the room started spinning. My vision blurred. My throat closed up. Anaphylaxis. I'm deathly allergic to almonds. Sarah knew that. Everyone knew that. The vanilla latte had been made with almond milk. I remember stumbling out of the room trying to get to my bag where I kept my EpiPen. I remember Sarah's voice behind me. Oh my God, Emma, are you okay? I remember thinking she sounded perfectly surprised, perfectly concerned. I remember the bathroom floor cold against my cheek, the taste of blood, the sound of my own wheezing. I remember dying. And then I remember being 12 years old again, sitting in Ms. Richardson's living room while she tried to convince my parents to let me attend a special STEM program. The confusion lasted for days. I thought I was going insane. I'd have panic attacks in class, remembering my death, remembering Sarah's betrayal, remembering 11 years of life that hadn't happened yet. But the memories were too clear, too consistent, and there were things I knew that I shouldn't know. The answers to tests I hadn't taken, the outcomes of events that hadn't occurred, the details of a future that was supposed to be inevitable. It took me 2 weeks to accept the truth. I had died, and I had been given a second chance. The question was what to do with it. My first instinct was revenge, immediate, brutal revenge. I wanted to destroy Sarah, to expose her to our parents, to make her suffer the way she'd made me suffer. But I was 12. No one would believe me. And even if they did, what could I prove? In this timeline, Sarah hadn't stolen anything yet because I hadn't created anything for her to steal. No, if I wanted real revenge, I had to be smart. I had to be patient. I had to beat her at her own game. So I started planning. I kept my head down at school, acted like the quiet, overlooked daughter I was supposed to be. But in private, I began working. I already knew the research that would make me famous. I'd spent 3 years developing it in my first life, and Sarah had spent 3 more years refining it. I had 6 years of theoretical development in my head, ready to be put on paper. But I couldn't publish yet. I was too young, too unknown. I needed credibility first. I reconnected with Dr. Park when I was 14, 2 years earlier than in my first life. I attended one of her public lectures at a local university and asked a question so insightful that she asked to speak with me afterward. "How old are you?" she asked, looking at me with that same sharp intensity I remembered. 14, eh? And how do you know about quantum coherence and neural systems? I read a lot. She laughed. You're more than a reader. You're a thinker. Give me your email address. I'm going to send you some papers. I want to know what you think. I spent the next 2 years as Dr. Park's unofficial mentee. She didn't know about my past life, didn't know about Sarah's future betrayal. She just knew I was brilliant and that brilliance should be nurtured. When I was 16, I started documenting my research officially. Every note was time-stamped. Every breakthrough was recorded and backed up to multiple cloud servers. I published preliminary findings in open access journals under a pseudonym, establishing a paper trail that couldn't be disputed. And I waited. Sarah went to Stanford right on schedule. I watched her struggle with her classes just like before. I watched our parents drain their savings to support her, just like before. I watched her flounder, searching for a direction, a purpose, something to make her special. I was 17 now, a freshman at Stanford myself. I'd skipped my senior year of high school and gotten in early on the strength of my published papers. Different papers than the quantum entanglement work. I was saving that. Sarah didn't know I was on campus. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She thought I was still at home, still the overlooked little sister. She had no idea I'd been carefully positioning myself for this exact moment. It was winter break of her junior year when she came home and I set the trap. I was visiting. I'd kept up appearances with our parents, playing the dutiful daughter. Sarah arrived 2 days after me, stressed and anxious about her future. I don't know what to do, she confided to our mother while I pretended to read in the corner. Everyone in my program knows what they want to specialize in, but I'm just lost. I'm not good enough at anything to make a real contribution. The desperation in her voice was identical to my first life. This was the moment. This was when she'd start looking for someone else's work to steal. I waited 3 days, then casually mentioned at dinner that I'd been doing some interesting research. Oh, Sarah said too casually. What kind of research? It's probably nothing, I said, playing my role perfectly. Just some ideas about quantum mechanics and neural networks. Dr. Park thinks it's interesting, but I'm not sure it'll go anywhere. Dr. Helen Park? From MIT? Yeah, I've been working with her remotely. She's great. I could see the wheels turning in Sarah's head. Her little sister, working with a renowned MIT professor. Her little sister, who wasn't supposed to be smart enough to be a threat. I'd love to hear about it, Sarah said with that same fake warmth I remembered. You know I'm good at giving feedback on research. Really, that would be amazing. I've been stuck on a few points. Over the next week, I showed her everything. Every piece of my quantum entanglement theory, every application to neural networks, every revolutionary implication. I explained it in terms she could understand and document, but never truly grasp. And just like before, she took notes, asked questions, acted supportive. Unlike before, I was ready. Every conversation we had was recorded. Every notebook I showed her was a carefully prepared copy. Every equation I explained was already published under my name in obscure academic journals she'd never think to check. When I left to go back to Stanford, I knew exactly what she'd do. I'd lived this before. Sure enough, 6 weeks later, Sarah submitted her doctoral program application to Stanford. The research proposal was mine, word for word in some places, clumsily paraphrased in others. But this time, it didn't matter, because 3 days before she submitted her application, I published my complete research, not in an obscure journal, not under a pseudonym, in Nature, the most prestigious scientific journal in the world, under my real name, Emma Chen. The paper was titled Quantum Entanglement as a Framework for Neural Network Architecture, a New Paradigm in Artificial Intelligence. It was accompanied by working models, experimental data, and peer reviews from 5 leading experts in the field, including Dr. Park. The academic world exploded. Within 24 hours, I had interview requests from MIT, Caltech, Stanford, Cambridge, Oxford. Within 48 hours, major tech companies were reaching out about partnerships. Within 72 hours, I was being called a generational talent, a paradigm shifter, the future of AI research. And Sarah had just submitted a doctoral proposal claiming to have developed the exact same theory. Stanford's doctoral admissions committee is thorough. When they received Sarah's application, someone on the committee recognized the work. They'd just read about it in Nature. They flagged it immediately. Sarah was called in for an interview. I imagine she thought it was a formality, a chance for them to be impressed by her brilliance. Instead, they asked her to explain her research in detail, without notes. She couldn't. She tried. I heard the recording later, obtained through a friend in the department. She stumbled through explanations, got fundamental concepts wrong, contradicted herself repeatedly. It was painful to listen to. Ms. Chen, the committee chair finally said, this research you've claimed as your own was published in Nature last week by Emma Chen. According to her biographical information, she's your younger sister. Can you explain this? I wasn't there for that moment, but I wish I had been. I wish I could have seen her face when she realized what I'd done. There must be some mistake, Sarah said. Emma and I worked on this together. It was collaborative research. She must have submitted it without telling me. Your application states that this is entirely your own work, developed independently over the past 2 years. There's no mention of collaboration. I meant that I was the primary researcher. Emma helped, but the core concepts were mine. That's interesting, because Emma Chen's publication includes dated documentation going back 4 years, along with preliminary findings published under various pseudonyms over the past 2 years. All of this predates your claimed research period. Additionally, we've contacted Dr. Helen Park at MIT, who confirms that Emma Chen has been working on this theory under her mentorship since the age of 14. Dr. Park has never heard your name mentioned in connection with this research. Silence. Ms. Chen, plagiarism is a serious offense. The fact that you've attempted to plagiarize your own sister's groundbreaking work makes this particularly egregious. Your application to our doctoral program is rejected, effective immediately. Furthermore, we are reporting this incident to Stanford's Office of Academic Integrity for investigation into whether you've engaged in similar behavior during your undergraduate career. That investigation took 3 months. They went through every paper she'd ever submitted, every project, every exam. They found 12 instances of academic dishonesty, plagiarized sections and term papers, a lab report copied from another student, problem sets that were identical to solutions posted online. Sarah Chen was expelled from Stanford 2 weeks before she was supposed to graduate. But I wasn't done. Expulsion wasn't enough. Not after what she'd done to me, not after she'd murdered me and stolen my life's work. I wanted complete annihilation. The thing about academic dishonesty is that it's public. Stanford issued a statement about why Sarah had been expelled. They didn't use her name, but it wasn't hard for people to figure out, especially when my Nature publication and her attempted plagiarism were mentioned in the same news cycle. Reporters picked up the story. Stanford student expelled for attempting to steal sister's groundbreaking AI research was the headline in the Chronicle of Higher Education. The Stanford Daily ran an op-ed about the importance of academic integrity. Inside Higher Ed did a piece on sibling rivalry taken to criminal extremes. Sarah's name was everywhere, attached to words like plagiarist, fraud, and thief. She tried to fight back. She gave an interview to a local news station claiming she was the victim of her sister's jealousy, that I had stolen her work and published it first. It fell completely flat. I had documentation, peer reviews, witnesses, and a publication in Nature. She had nothing but lies and desperation. The scientific community is small and has a long memory. Sarah Chen became a cautionary tale, a punchline, a warning about what happens when you try to cheat your way to success. But the professional destruction wasn't the worst part for her. The worst part was our parents. For the first time in her life, Sarah had disappointed them. Not just disappointed, humiliated them. Their golden child, their perfect daughter, exposed as a fraud on a national stage. My mother called me crying, "Gaika, how could she do this? How could she try to steal from you?" The irony was so thick I could taste it. For years, they'd let Sarah take everything from me. Money, opportunities, attention. But academic research? That was different. That was public. That was embarrassing. "I don't know, Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm just glad the truth came out." "We're so sorry, Emma. We never knew you were doing such important work. We should have supported you more." Too little, too late. But I accepted their apology gracefully because I'm not petty. I'm thorough. With Sarah's academic career destroyed, she had to move back home. No university would touch her. No company would hire her. Google and Facebook had both been interested in my research and had done background checks that revealed the plagiarism scandal. She got a job at a local retail store. Minimum wage. No benefits. The kind of job I'd worked while putting myself through community college in my first life. Meanwhile, I was accepting a full doctoral fellowship from MIT. Dr. Park had personally recruited me, and the university was providing full funding plus a generous living stipend. I was going to be working in a state-of-the-art lab with unlimited resources. Everything Sarah had dreamed of having was mine, but I still wasn't satisfied. Because in my first life, Sarah hadn't just stolen my work and ruined my career, she'd murdered me. In this life, she hadn't had the chance, but the intent had been there. I'd seen it in her eyes when she'd invited me to share my research, the same cold calculation I remembered from before. She would have done it again if she'd gotten the chance. She would have poisoned me, discarded me, stolen my life without a second thought. I needed her to understand what she'd lost, what she'd thrown away for greed and jealousy. So I made sure she understood. 6 months after her expulsion, when I was home for winter break, I arranged to meet Sarah for coffee. She looked awful, thin, tired, wearing a retail store uniform with a name tag that said, "Hi, I'm Sarah." "Emma," she said when I sat down, "I can't believe you agreed to meet me. I thought it was time we talked." "I'm so sorry." She started crying immediately. "I'm so sorry for what I did. I was jealous and stupid, and I ruined everything. I ruined my life." I sipped my coffee and waited. "Can you ever forgive me?" she asked. "No," I said simply. She blinked. "What?" "I can't forgive you, Sarah. Because I know what you would have done if things had gone your way. You would have taken my research, built your career on it, and cut me out completely. And if I had tried to fight back, you would have destroyed me without hesitation." "That's not true." "It is true. I know you, Sarah. Better than you know yourself. You're not sorry you tried to steal my work. You're sorry you got caught." Her tears stopped. For a moment, I saw real anger flash across her face. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm not sorry I tried. I'm sorry I failed. Do you want to know why?" "Enlighten me." "Because you don't deserve it. You don't deserve your success. your intelligence, your perfect life. It all came so easy to you while I had to work for every scrap of recognition I ever got. Mom and Dad gave you nothing, and somehow you still ended up with everything. How is that fair? It's not fair, I agreed, and none of it is fair. But life isn't about fairness, Sarah. It's about choices. You chose to steal instead of creating. You chose to destroy instead of building. You chose to see me as an enemy instead of a sister. And what did you choose, Emma? Revenge? Is that what this is? No, I said. I chose survival. I chose to protect my work and my future from someone who would have taken both without a second thought. Everything that happened to you, the expulsion, the scandal, the ruined career, those were the natural consequences of your own actions. I didn't destroy you, Sarah. You destroyed yourself. I left her sitting there and never looked back. 3 years have passed since then. I'm 20 now, working on my PhD at MIT, and my research has spawned an entire new field of study. Companies have licensed my patents for billions of dollars. I've won awards, given keynote speeches at major conferences, and been featured on the cover of Time magazine's Next Generation of Innovators issue. Dr. Park is my doctoral advisor and has become a mentor and friend. She knows the full story now. I told her everything one night after a particularly successful experiment, when she asked why I'd been so driven, so focused, so determined to succeed. Your sister, she'd said quietly. You knew she'd try to steal your work. I'd lived it before, admitted. In another life, she succeeded. She took everything from me and then killed me when I became inconvenient. Dr. Park didn't ask how I knew that. She's a quantum physicist. She understands that the universe is stranger than we can imagine. You've given her more mercy than she deserved, Dr. Park said. In another life, you could have destroyed her completely. I did destroy her, I said. I destroyed the future she thought she deserved, but I left her alive to see what she could have been if she'd chosen differently. Sarah still lives at home with our parents. She's 24 now, working 2 retail jobs to pay off the student loans for a degree she never completed. She has no prospects, no future, no hope of ever working in the field she dreamed of joining. Our parents finally see her clearly now. They understand that they created a monster by indulging her every whim and teaching her that she deserved success without effort. They apologize to me regularly, try to build a relationship with me, offer support I no longer need. I'm cordial but distant. They're my parents, and I don't hate them, but I can't forget the years of neglect, the stolen opportunities, the casual cruelty of their favoritism. Some wounds don't heal just because someone finally acknowledges they exist. Last month, I was home for Thanksgiving. Sarah and I were in the same room for the first time in a year. She's different now, quieter, smaller, defeated. She barely looked at me during dinner. After the meal, I found her standing in the backyard, staring at nothing. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd made different choices? I asked, coming to stand beside her. She didn't look at me. Every day. What do you think you'd be doing right now? I don't know. Something meaningful, maybe. Something that mattered. She finally turned to face me and her eyes were empty. Do you ever feel guilty? For what? For being so much better than me. For making me look like a failure just by existing. I thought about my answer carefully. No, I finally said. I don't feel guilty for being good at what I do, but I do feel sad. Sad? Sad that you saw my success as your failure. Sad that you thought the only way to win was to tear me down. Sad that we could have been allies instead of enemies if you'd just chosen differently. Would you? She asked. Would you have been my ally? I considered the question. In my first life, before the betrayal, I had loved my sister. I had looked up to her, wanted her approval, craved her affection. If she'd supported me instead of sabotaging me, if she'd celebrated my success instead of resenting it, we could have been unstoppable together. Yes, I said. In another life, I would have given you everything. I would have shared my research, collaborated with you, made sure you had credit for every idea you contributed. I would have lifted you up the way you should have lifted me up. But not in this life. No, not in this life. In this life, you made your choice, and I made mine. She nodded slowly. I hate you, you know. I hate you so much it keeps me awake at night. I know. But I'm also proud of you. Isn't that fucked up? I destroyed my own life trying to steal yours, and part of me is still proud that my little sister is changing the world. I didn't know what to say to that. For what it's worth, Sarah said, I really am sorry. Not sorry I got caught. You were right about that. But sorry that I was the kind of person who would try in the first place. Sorry that I let jealousy turn me into a monster. Sorry that I threw away the one person who might have actually cared about me if I hadn't been such a selfish bitch. Thank you, I said quietly. It doesn't change anything, does it? No, it doesn't. I didn't think so. We stood there in silence for a few more minutes. Two sisters separated by choices and consequences, by betrayal and rebirth, by everything that had happened and everything that could have been. Finally, Sarah went inside. I stayed in the backyard looking up at the stars, thinking about the path my life had taken. Two lives, really, one where I'd been a victim and one where I'd been a victor. I thought about the moment I died in my first life, poisoned and alone on a bathroom floor while my sister stole my future. I thought about waking up 12 years old again with a second chance I'd never asked for but desperately needed. I thought about every choice I'd made since then, every calculated move, every careful plan. I'd spent 5 years preparing my revenge, 5 years positioning myself to destroy the person who'd destroyed me. And I'd succeeded. Completely, utterly, devastatingly succeeded. So why did I still feel empty? The answer came to me slowly, like a truth I'd known all along but had been afraid to acknowledge. Revenge isn't the same as healing. Justice isn't the same as peace. I'd destroyed Sarah's future, but I hadn't recovered what she'd taken from me in my first life. The years of happiness I might have had, the relationship with my sister that could have been beautiful instead of toxic, the innocence of trusting that my family actually loved me. Those things were gone forever, in both timelines. But I had something else now, something Sarah would never have. I had my work, my research, my contribution to human knowledge that would outlive both of us. I had Dr. Park's mentorship and respect. I had colleagues who valued my mind and my integrity. I had a future built on my own merit, on my own terms, that no one could ever take away. Sarah had tried to steal my destiny and had lost everything. I had protected mine and gained the world. Maybe that wasn't perfect justice. Maybe it wasn't complete healing. But it was enough. It had to be enough. I took out my phone and pulled up the latest email from Dr. Park. She'd forwarded me an invitation to present my research at the Nobel Conference in Stockholm. Not as a winner, not yet, I was too young, and the research was too new. But as a featured speaker, a rising star, someone whose work was already being considered for future recognition. You should accept, Dr. Park had written. It's time for the world to see what you're capable of. Time to stop looking back and start looking forward. She was right. I'd spent 5 years preparing for revenge and 3 years watching it unfold exactly as I'd planned. Sarah was destroyed, thoroughly and completely. My parents had learned their lesson. The world knew who the real genius was. It was time to move on. I typed out my response. I accept. Thank you for believing in me. Then I deleted my last paragraph and wrote instead, I accept. Thank you for seeing me. Because that was what Dr. Park had done, what she'd always done. She'd seen me when my own family was blind. She'd valued me when they treated me as disposable. She'd nurtured my talent when they tried to suppress it. She'd been the family I deserved, even if she wasn't the family I was born with. I hit send and walked back into the house. Dinner was winding down. My parents were doing dishes. Sarah was watching TV in the living room, mindlessly scrolling through her phone. I'm heading out, I announced. I have an early flight tomorrow. So soon, my mother asked. You just got here. I have work to do, a presentation in Stockholm. Stockholm, my father said, impressed despite himself. That's wonderful, honey. I nodded, accepted their hugs, avoided Sarah's eyes as I walked past the living room. I was almost to the door when I heard her voice. Emma. I turned. She was standing now, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Congratulations, she said. On Stockholm, on everything. You deserve it. It was probably the most genuine thing she'd said to me in years. Thank you, I said. And then I left. The Nobel Conference was exactly as prestigious as I'd imagined. I presented my research to an audience of the world's leading scientists, fielded questions from Nobel laureates, and networked with researchers whose work I'd been reading since I was a teenager. On the last day of the conference, an elderly physicist approached me. Dr. Marcus Way, winner of the Nobel Prize in Physics 15 years ago for his work on quantum computing. Miss Chen, he said, your research is extraordinary, truly paradigm-shifting. Thank you, Dr. Way. That means a great deal coming from you. I wanted to ask you something, if you don't mind. Of course. How did you know? He asked. How did you know that quantum entanglement could be applied to neural networks in this way? The connection isn't obvious. It requires a leap of intuition that most researchers spend decades trying to achieve. You're 20 years old and you've already made it. How? I thought about my answer carefully. I couldn't tell him the truth, that I'd had 11 extra years to think about it, that I'd developed this theory across 2 lifetimes, that I'd been driven by a need for revenge so powerful it had carried me through death itself. I think, I said slowly, it comes from understanding what it means to be entangled with something, to be connected in a way that transcends normal boundaries, to affect and be affected by something even when you are separated by impossible distances. He nodded thoughtfully. A philosophical answer. I like it. The science came from the philosophy, I said. I spent a long time thinking about connection and separation, about how things that seem independent can actually be fundamentally linked. Once I understood that on a deep level, the mathematics followed naturally. Well, Sheikh Angterway said, I look forward to seeing where your research takes you, and I suspect I'll be back here in a few years to watch you accept your own Nobel Prize. I laughed, embarrassed and pleased. That's very kind of you to say. It's not kindness. It's pattern recognition. I've been doing this long enough to spot genuine brilliance when I see it. He shook my hand and walked away, leaving me standing there with tears in my eyes. This was it. This was the life I was supposed to have. Not the one where I died on a bathroom floor, forgotten and betrayed. This one where I stood in Stockholm being praised by Nobel laureates for work that would change the world. Sarah could never have had this, even if she'd successfully stolen my research. She didn't have the depth of understanding, the intuitive leaps, the philosophical framework that made the work meaningful. She could have mimicked the mathematics, but she could never have truly created something new. That's what she'd never understood. That's what our parents had never understood. Success isn't about taking credit for someone else's work. It's about doing the work yourself, about pushing through the hard parts and the frustrating parts and the parts where you want to give up until you finally break through to something real. Sarah had wanted the glory without the struggle. She'd wanted the destination without the journey. And in the end, that's why she'd failed. Not because I'd stopped her, though I had, but because she was fundamentally incapable of creating the kind of success she craved. She could only steal it, and stolen success is always hollow. I'm 23 now, the same age I was when I died in my first life. A few weeks ago, I successfully defended my doctoral dissertation. Dr. Park cried. My committee gave me a standing ovation. 3 tech companies immediately offered me positions with salaries that made my head spin. I turned them all down. Instead, I accepted a position as an assistant professor at MIT. I'm going to teach. I'm going to mentor students the way Dr. Park mentored me. I'm going to make sure that brilliant young people who don't have support at home find support in the academic community. I'm going to be the person I needed when I was younger. Dr. Park threw me a small celebration dinner after my defense. Just close friends and colleagues, people who'd supported me through my doctoral work. Toward the end of the evening, she stood and raised her glass. To Emma Chen, she said, who has accomplished more in her 23 years than most researchers accomplish in a lifetime. But more importantly, to Emma Chen, the person, someone who faced betrayal and hardship and came through it not with bitterness, but with grace and determination. You inspire us all. Everyone drank. I tried not to cry and failed spectacularly. Later, when most people had left, Dr. Park pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Not just for your research, though that's extraordinary, but for who you've become. For choosing to build rather than destroy, even when destruction would have been easier." "I did destroy," I reminded her. "Sarah Yashite, you protected yourself," Dr. Park interrupted. "There's a difference. You could have been vindictive. You could have salted the earth behind you. Instead, you simply made sure she couldn't hurt you or anyone else. That's not destruction. That's justice." "It doesn't always feel like justice." "No, it feels like loss. Loss of the family you should have had, the childhood you deserved, the sister who could have been your friend instead of your enemy. Those losses are real, Emma. They're allowed to hurt." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "But you've built something beautiful in spite of those losses," Dr. Park continued. "A career, a future, a legacy. You've turned pain into purpose. That's more than justice. That's alchemy." I saw Sarah one last time before I moved to Cambridge to start my professorship. She'd reached out through email, the first time she'd initiated contact in over a year. She asked if we could meet for coffee. Just the two of us. She said she had something to tell me. I almost said no. What more was there to say? We'd covered everything already. She was sorry. I was unmoved. We both had to live with the consequences of her choices, but curiosity got the better of me. We met at the same coffee shop where I'd told her I couldn't forgive her 3 years ago. She looked better than she had then. Healthier, more put together. She was wearing business casual clothes instead of a retail uniform. "Thanks for meeting me," she said as I sat down. "You said you had something to tell me." "I got a job," she said. "And son, a real job, not retail, not minimum wage. I'm going to be a technical writer at a pharmaceutical company. It's not glamorous and it's not research, but it's in the field, adjacent to science at least." "That's good," I said, and I meant it. "I'm glad you found something." "It's not what I dreamed of. It's not a PhD or a lab or anything like what you have. But it's honest work, and I earned it myself. They didn't care about Stanford or the plagiarism scandal. It's been long enough that it didn't come up in the background check. I got hired based on my writing samples and my interview." "Then congratulations, really." "I wanted you to know because—" She hesitated. "Because I wanted you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be better, to build something real instead of stealing something hollow." "That's all anyone can do," I said. "I also wanted to tell you that I'm seeing a therapist now. We're working through a lot of stuff. My jealousy, my relationship with mom and dad, what I did to you." "How's that going?" "It's hard. Really hard. Facing the fact that I was so willing to destroy my own sister for personal gain. But my therapist says that acknowledging it is the first step toward changing it." We sat in silence for a moment. "I don't expect forgiveness," Sarah said finally. "I know I don't deserve it and I'm not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to become someone who would deserve it. Even if you never give it to me." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, of another angle, of some hidden agenda. I didn't find any. She looked tired and sincere and older than her 26 years. "I hope you succeed," I said. "I hope you build a good life for yourself, Sarah. A real one based on your own merit." "Thank you." She smiled sadly. I hope someday I'll read about your Nobel Prize and feel nothing but happiness for you. No jealousy, no bitterness, no resentment. Just pride in my brilliant little sister." "That would be nice," I said. "It would be more than I deserve." "Probably, but growth isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to be better than you were." She nodded. "Then I choose to be better." We finished our coffee in almost companionable silence. When we stood to leave, Sarah hesitated, then held out her hand. "Good luck at MIT, Professor Chen." I shook her hand. "Good luck with everything, Sarah." And then we went our separate ways, possibly for the last time. I start teaching in the fall. I have my lectures prepared, my syllabus finalized, my office decorated with plants and photos, and a framed copy of my Nature publication. On my desk is a letter from the Nobel Committee. Not an award notification, I'm still too young, too early in my career, but an acknowledgement, a note saying my work is being watched, considered, recognized as potentially prize-worthy in the future. It's enough, more than enough. I've achieved everything I set out to achieve when I woke up 12 years old with memories of betrayal and murder. I've protected my work, built my career, and ensured that Sarah could never steal from me or anyone else again. But more than that, I've built something positive, something that will outlast the revenge and the pain and the family dysfunction that shaped both my lives. I've built a legacy. Students will learn from my research. Other scientists will build on my foundations. Somewhere, somehow, my work will make the world better, smarter, more advanced. That's what Sarah never understood. Success isn't about taking from others. It's about contributing something real, something meaningful, something that matters. I contributed, I created, I built, and in the end, that's the ultimate victory. Not that I destroyed my sister's dreams, though I did. Not that I achieved fame and recognition, though I have. But that I took pain and betrayal and death itself and transformed it into something beautiful and lasting and true. That's the real revenge. Not making Sarah suffer, though she has, but proving that even at her worst, even when she killed me and stole my work and destroyed my future, she couldn't actually defeat me. Because I came back and I won. And I built something she could never take away. I'm Emma Chen, quantum physicist, MIT professor, and the girl who died and refused to stay dead. This is my story. This is my victory. This is my life.